I don't know whether you can hear me or not. Maybe
Oh, it's gonna fall.
Welcome back to Trust God, Bro, episode 53. This is a big number, 53.
It is. That's pretty up there.
Yeah, uppity up.
There, yeah.
Thy man who joineth on the podcast, his soul is blessed.
Is thou, that is thy.
Thy bones are truly healthy today, good sir.
Why, blessings unto you for that compliment.
Thy blessings have been received.
Thinkest thou.
Alright, that's as much as Old English as I can do.
Yeah, that's hard.
But no, there's this book called Indwelling Sin by John Owen.
Yes.
And so, I mean, if you picture the 16th century and
Yeah.
a lot of crazy things happening.
In England.
In England.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's this guy, John Owen, he's like, you imagine him in his room, like candle lit, and he's just, pouring over these documents.
Yeah.
He was writing books and books and but anyways, there's this book called Indwelling Sin that he wrote, and I think after I was reading it, I started to think in Old English.
Yeah.
So like everything you do, you put it in that like weird Puritan way that they say it. It's the man who wakes up and eats cereal is truly a blessed man.
Yeah. Verily.
I don't know if that's happened. Verily.
Yeah.
Point 1, they all write in numbers. Point 2.
Yes, they do. Yeah, everything's in points, and then they start using Roman numerals for chapters. I'm like sitting there trying to decipher. I'm like, okay, XCII. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
But I mean, it is hard to read. Just like the language itself, like it was a little mind melting.
Yeah.
But I mean, the content is just so rich. It's just like you just want, and you're just looking up like every other word to see what they mean.
Yeah.
But I mean, like they know so many words that just mean exactly what they want to say and send a really good message. And so, I mean, there's just no prose like it anymore.
Yeah, very enriching. And there's actually 2 versions. There's an easier to read version, and then the original version.
Hard to read version.
And you read the hard to read version.
Yeah.
And I read the easy to read about a year ago, but you just read the hard.
Yep, just finished it. Yeah.
So I really wanted to have Caleb talk about it. So a reintroduction, because some people may not have listened to some of the other episodes. Who do we have today?
My name is Caleb Helenthal. I'm a recent graduate from University of Illinois. Going on staff the campus outreach in Peoria, and good friends with Dayton. So.
Yeah. I'm really enriched by your conversation and just like your heart. It's like you really want to be around people, and you really want to share Jesus with people, and it's inspiring.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and a lot of fun to hang out with too.
Appreciate that a lot. A lot more than the other
TBH,
stuff.
9 out of 10. Do you ever do TBHs? No, you didn't have Instagram until later.
Yeah.
And like,
what's a TBH, just to be honest?
Yeah.
Okay.
In like junior high, it was like really big. Like, like this post if you want a TBH, so you'd like it or whatever, and then they would go on your profile and then give you their honest opinion of you. Hot takes.
Yeah.
But I mean, like,
hot takes.
Like TBH, like you're fun and but we really don't see each other that much besides in the hallways at school.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
But no, on that note too, I think you have a lot of gifts and ways you can impact college students, and so Caleb will be on the college campus with campus outreach, and so I think also he didn't ask me to say that, but I think if it's on anyone's heart to support him, I think he would appreciate that. He's support raising, and so through campus outreach, I guess you could look it up through
the website. It's cocentralil.org, and so or you just reach out to me. We'll have to talk about that stuff and meet people. So
all right. Favorite Pop-Tart flavor?
Chocolate.
Favorite cereal?
Ooh, Honey Nut Cheerios.
Favorite ice cream?
Vanilla.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
If you were a chip, what chip would you be?
Sour cream and onion.
Okay. If you had to go on a first date, where would you go? With me.
Dayton, I'm flattered.
To be honest.
TBH. We should just go to the public pool.
Oh, okay. So all my makeup can come off.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see your natural beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Nat beauty. So, that was some icebreakers. So you can get to know Caleb a little bit.
Now that I'm saying, like, all of, like, the favorite food stuff was, like, very plain.
Yeah.
Food. Like, the plainest flavors I've ever. I almost said just regular potato chip for potato chip. I'm like, I gotta go something else. So I went with sour cream.
Do you even like sour cream?
Oh, dude, I love sour cream. I can live off sour cream.
Oh, that's fun. All right. So, Indwelling Sin by John Owen.
Yep.
Get yourself a copy of the day. Top 10 books I've read in the last year. Maybe. 2 years. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, for me, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
I love it a lot.
How did it help you? How did this book impact your life? What things stood out to you?
Yeah, it's a very practical book. And it kind of goes backwards a little bit, where it, like, gives you the practical things, and then it kind of explains it later in the book, which in most books it's, here's all the abstract stuff, this is what this means, and then it gives you practical towards the end. This book kind of does it a little bit backwards. And so, yeah, just a lot of practical stuff, of just like how to view sin, like how sin deceives us. One thing that was super helpful towards the beginning, it talks about like the deceit of our own hearts, and like how it makes the Psalm, like Psalm 139, where it's like, oh Lord, search my heart. You know, if there's any grievous way in me, make it known that I may walk in your righteous paths. I completely butchered that, so that's not word for word, but go look it up. It's a really good psalm. And so just like knowing what's in your heart, it's like God knows what's in your heart, but we don't know the full depths of our hearts. And it's just like, that's kind of crazy, because I mean, like, God like wants our hearts, you know what I mean? And like that's what comes from the heart like flows out of the mouth. And like Jesus talks about it a lot, and just like how important it is to have a pure heart. And so and really our hearts were created for Jesus, like for God. And so it's our natural, it is our good. And I think there's this war in between us against that. And that's what the book is. That's what Indwelling Sin is. Camera was falling down below our noses. You got a good look at our chins.
So, okay. So I want to kind of get the big idea of this book for people, like Spark Notes. This was really helpful for me and for you, and I think it could be for other people too. Specifically, I think I was going through a time of fighting sin in my life. Just some of the truths that it says about God and what sin really is, and the deceitfulness of sin really helped me to want to make war against that and to fight against my sin. So let's get into some of the meat and potatoes. When you think of indwelling sin, how would you describe, it talks about the law of sin. What is the law of indwelling sin? Yeah,
I mean, so a lot of the book revolves around that Romans 7 passage. That's really, it really does, like, that passage in Romans 7, it really does just kind of speak more to, like, the human condition. Like, I know what's good, and, like, I want these good things, and, like, as a believer, it's like, man, like, you're learning about all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, awesome, like, I know what's good, I love Jesus, and this is awesome, but then we find that we still have, like, this bent towards evil, towards things that we know are evil, things that we don't even like things that we're like, this is disgusting, you know, but we still, like, do these things, and it's like, that's like what Paul describes as a law that he finds within himself, that we aren't enslaved to, in Christ, but it still, like, is there, still, like, lives in us. And so this book really just kind of dives deeper into what exactly that means, because it's kind of, mysterious, and we don't really know we don't know everything, all the ins and outs of it, but no,
that's a good way to word it. The Romans 7:21 passage says, I find a law that I would do good, yet evil is present with me. as true as gravity is on us right now, like we're stuck to the ground, your butt's there,
Yep.
you're not floating up into space.
Yeah.
Because gravity, there is a law of sin, and it's both in the believer and the unbeliever. So for the unbeliever, they know nothing but the law. It's as if they're going through a current, and they're just letting the current take them.
Yep.
They don't feel the current because they're not fighting against it. But the believer is aware of this law in their life. They're aware of the law of indwelling sin, because when you go against the current, you start to feel the tug. You're like, oh man, like there's actually a current here.
Yeah.
There's a law
Yep.
that I'm warring against. And so in the believer, its grip is loosened and its grip is weakened. I think moving on to the next part, he just dwells, he spends like the most of the book just talking about sin,
Yeah.
which is funny. He's just talking about the nature of it and like what it does, what it tends to do to people. What are some of those things?
Yeah, so he talks about, well, he breaks it down to little points, obviously. But yeah, so one thing that stuck out to me was how sin deceives us and draws away the mind. And so like draws the mind away from what we know is good, and from like seeing like beauties of spiritual things. There's a quote in there that says like whatever we treasure up in our heart is like what ends up like coming out like is what is used against us in temptation. So like just like being diligent about, okay, what am I treasuring up in my heart, you know? And he goes into depth about like certain disciplines of like meditation and prayer and, you know, scripture reading of just like, okay, just like constantly keeping the mind like on Christ, keeping the mind on heavenly and spiritual things, you know, to like ward off sin and to keep sin away, to continue to think about, you know, just the beauties of Christ. But sin, what it does is it tries to distract, you know, it's like whenever like you're sitting like trying to read your Bible, it's like, you know, you're just constantly like trying, you know, like checking your phone or like, man, like a million things. And it's like, it's so hard, like, especially like, even like in prayer and in meditation, it's like the first like 5 or 10 minutes of prayer, I'm just trying to like wrestle my brain into submission. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, man, like my mind is just kind of everywhere. And like, that's kind of like the fight. It's like trying to pull it away. It's like, no, like this, that. And then you're just kind of like, no, you know? Yeah. It's like, there's that kind of war that you're talking about.
And even like an apathy, I feel, in my heart.
Certainly, yeah.
There's a constant pull of saying, and you said this, the beauty of God. Saying that, no, I don't think God is as beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, he's not really the one that is good for me. In fact, so I so often during the day, I'm kicking against God. Like, I don't know, that's just my nature.
Yeah, it's like, and it's, throughout the entire book, he's just saying, like, be diligent with your mind, like, be diligent. Because, like, he says that it's our mind's duty to present spiritual things as beautiful to the heart. And so, like, it is our mind's duty to protect and guard our hearts. And so, like, whenever we think of, like, you know, like, guarding your heart, usually we think of, like, you know, Christian dating or, like, relationships or stuff like that, which is, like, true, but also just, like, guarding your heart against, like, what he would say is like the lusting after other things, just guarding your heart, you know, keeping it like under control, because we can't know it and we can't control it, but it's just like all we can do is we're presenting these things to our heart and we're trying to guard it, because, you know, like we were saying earlier, it's like it's deceitful, you know, and it's just we don't know it completely, and so that's the duty of the mind unto the heart. So
he has this interesting quote, and I really like the way you said that. He says, every act of sin is a fruit of being weary of God. So that's one of the ones that it just hits you and it like sticks there. And it's like, okay. Every act of sin is a fruit of being weary of God.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, like if I do X, think about this certain thing or steal this thing or just lashing out to other people, frustration. The root of whatever all those things is just being tired of God. And not resting in Him. So the question was, what are some of the elements of sin? Like, what have we learned about sin through this book? One of the things I wrote down was the more in the way his Old English says is the more men sin, the more they are inclined to sin. And I mean that really does make sense. I mean it's like the more we taste that and was like, okay, this is like good in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think I actually kind of like this. But the root of sin is a lie. There's no fulfilling there. There's no satisfying love or redemption. So, yeah.
Yeah. Towards like the middle to end of the book, he talks about just kind of like this 1-2 punch that sin has of drawing the mind off. You know, first drawing away the mind, kind of having like this weariness of God, and then it entices the heart unto sin, and like makes these promises of like, okay, like, you know, it removes like the logic of like, okay, we know, you know, God is better than all these things. We know what is good. We, you know, like it draws us away from that, and then it's like, you know, hey, you can have this right now. You know, like, hey, like heart, like I know, like this is what you want. And your heart's like, wow, that is what I want. Yeah. But your mind knows it's satisfied in God, but your heart is your heart, you know, and it just kind of goes, you know, if it's not being guarded, it just kind of latches at the first thing that'll satisfy it. Yeah. And so, like, that's kind of like the 1-2 punch of sin, is it, you know, draws your mind off and then entices the heart. And so, so when you are weary of God, it's just kind of like, man, God, and you know, a lot of times it's like good things that we want, you know what I mean? And we just like make it sinful because we replace it with God. It's just like, man, God, like, I really just want to feel validated, you know, so I'm going to pick on this guy or whatever, you know, and like be rude to him so I can have friends, you know? And it's like, okay, I know that's wrong, you know, and I know that's, you know, God satisfies me, but, you know, logic's taken away and my heart's desire for validation, even though it's, you know, validated by God, it just kind of latches onto the right now, like, dude, my friends could think I'm cool though. You know?
That's a good example.
And so I mean that again, you know, kind of he keeps going back to this idea of like the mind's duty to guard the heart, you know, presenting these things as beautiful to your heart. And so it really is like just a big part of the endurance of running the race, you know, of just like, okay, like, like you're weary, it's like, but like just continuing that duty and finding joy in that. And so, that was a very practical thing that I found. It's just like helpful to like see it that way of just like, you know, because a lot of times it's like I sin, I'm just like, man, like I'm a piece of crap, you know, like do I even love God? It's like, it's like I know what's wrong. And, you know, Paul says this too. He's like, although I know and desire what is right, I do. He's like, though I want to do this, I do what I do not want, you know? And it's just kind of like that idea of like, man, like I know what I want and I know how to get it, but I don't do that.
And that's another element of like the sin itself, indwelling sin in believers, is a law that is ever present. It never goes away. It never diminishes. And even Paul like said that, like he still wars against this. And so, but it's a very good sign that you hate it and like you you have a dislike to it. You're like, okay, like I don't want to keep doing this. You know, the notes for the, you know, prep for a podcast is good when they're on a Jimmy John's napkin. So, you know. So yeah, we're aware of this in our lives, and I think you could spend a lot of this book thinking about it. What are ways I can mortify sin, put sin to death? I have these things in my life that I would really like to get rid of. How do I do that?
Well, the first thing is not doing them. You know.
Wait. So you're saying if I simply do not do the thing?
You just don't do it.
Oh, why did I think of that?
Great. But yeah, just kind of going back to, you know, something that you said earlier, Dayton, of just like when you do, you know, when you sin more, like you're more inclined to sin. And so really like being diligent and like not sinning, of course, like is important. One thing that I remember him talking about is meditating on the cross of Christ, and just like looking at Jesus as, you know, the sacrifice, like just the disgustingness of the cross, and just seeing your sin as disgusting. Is just really, you know, continuing to not just be like, oh, you know, like it's okay, or like, you know, maybe it'd be nice, you know, but just kind of like really, you know, continuing to meditate on, okay, what is, you know, what is the penalty of my sin? You know, it's like, what is, the consequences, even though we may not see them or feel them or believe them in the moment. It's just like, man, like they're there, and they're paid for, in a really, like, I don't know, nasty way. You know, just think of like, even like Jesus' like physical punishment of like, like the cross and all that, and then the wrath of God being poured out on him on the cross. It's just like, man, it's really cool to see that and just be like, man, like because of my sin, like that's like this is what happened. Like the Son of God is doing this for me, and so I mean, this entire book is about just kind of like your mind's duty on keeping yourself from sin, and so there's there's one quote in there, and this was really cool. This was something that really stuck out to me, and I highlighted it in my Kindle, and it's just like, it's like an entire paragraph. I was just like, all of this is good. And so he talks about like in meditation, like what you need to do is constantly bringing your heart to the forefront. Bring your heart before God. Bring your heart to your to the scriptures, and be like, okay, God, like in Psalm 139, like, God, if there is any grievous way in me, like, just pleading that the Spirit would search you and know your heart, is just constantly doing this work. And the quote, he talks about how there are a lot of theologians, a lot of men who will love, the love of the gospel, the beauty of the gospel, like, man, like I'm saved, and it's like, this is awesome, like Jesus loves me and all that stuff, and that's great, and that is, we've been talking about that, but he says not many people want to do the work of tilling up the ground of your heart, constantly being like, constantly breaking it up, not letting it just sit and harden, but just this constant work of like, okay, like, like I need to, bring my heart before God and just really understand it and wrestle with it, and and not let it get to a place that you look back and you're like, man, like how did I come this far, I mean, it's really, we can't cause the regeneration in our heart without like the Holy Spirit and Jesus, but it's our duty to take ourselves to that well. Like, he is the life, that like we aren't providing the life for ourselves, because like I said, it's easy for me to trust my spiritual disciplines, but I mean, it's I think part of that is like tilling up that soil of realizing, like meditating on our sin and like just behind it. Is that what you're saying? Or? Okay. I don't know. I mean, because practically just seeing in my own life, and I'm sure you and any other believer can attest to this, is like you can just go through life and you can just kind of like not worry about your sin. You know what I mean? It's like you just go, like you can read your Bible, and then like you do some, like even throughout the day, it's like you see your sin, but you're just kind of like,
whatever.
Like, like I don't need to deal with this right now. I'm not perfect, that kind of stuff.
Trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like keep going and going and going, and you just never take time to sit and address the sin. You're just kind of like, man, like why did I do that? You know what I mean? Just kind of trying to understand, and bringing your heart to God. And so, just seeing like God's jealousy over our hearts should make us jealous over our own hearts. You know what I mean? It's just not letting it, being given away to all these things, but it's like being jealous over your own heart of like, man, like I can give God the thing that he wants is my heart. You know what I mean? And it's like not letting that just kind of be like, oh, I was busy today, or oh, I can't be perfect. It's like, no, it's like, actually meditating on, man, what is happening, and understanding that. And I think that was helpful for me as well. Just like in my prayer time, it's like just designating a time, within my prayer of just like, okay, God, like, search me
and know me. That stood out to me too about Psalm 139. I always read that and said, okay, that's really cool. God knows me. Like, he knows all parts. He knows my hair. He knows, when I rise up, when I get down. That's so cool. But really, he's saying is like, search me and know me, God, and reveal, like, dig up these things in my heart that are like grievous, like every way that is against you, God. And so I think there's a part there that David is really impressing that God knows us better than we know ourselves. We don't know the depths of our sin, and really God is the one, he's the true great physician, that he can really heal our messed up heart, and he knows our messed up thoughts, and he knows it so much better than we do, and we can ask him to know us and help us to uncover that, and that was helpful.
Yeah, and I think something that we forgot to mention during like talking about what sin is that sin is enmity with God, which means it's against, not only is it against God, it's against everything that God is for.
Yeah.
You know, so like it's just like pushing against everything
Team
it possibly
anti-God.
can. Exactly. And so like just understanding how deep that is. I can't find the exact quote in here. I know I'm in the right area, but it so like in the mortification of sin, this was just really helpful and kind of like convicted me, where it's not just having this attitude of like this general idea of like doing things to the glory of God, of just like, man, you know, like, oh, that's to the glory of God, that's to the glory of God, just kind of like saying it and just being like, yeah, you know, I like God, you know, like I want to do things to his glory, you know.
I'm a God guy.
Yeah, exactly. But he says where the rubber hits the road is like, how do things glorify God? Like actually thinking and considering, okay, God, like I want to glorify you. How does this glorify you? And then thinking out and fleshing that out. Okay, like how does this glorify you? Does that kind of make sense? Instead of doing everything to the general aim of glorifying God.
But to think specifically.
How
does my
how's my work glorify God? Instead it's like, oh yeah, I do it to the glory of God. A lot of times when I think that, I'm just like, oh, like I have God on my mind while I'm doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it's like God gets the credit for this. And it's like, yes, those are good things, but it's like, how do I, actually truly like meditate on these things and want these things, instead of just kind of essentially taking the lazy way out, and just kind of putting a bow tie on it and saying, okay, it's good.
Just a quote, for what we are in private duties, that we are, and no more.
Yep.
It's one of those
and no more.
old English things, no more.
Dude, yeah, that's such a good quote.
Yeah.
That's like really good.
Think about it. What do we do in our private moments when it's just God in us, our hearts? Like, what are we really wanting?
Yeah.
Am I wanting this, like, sharing on a podcast? Am I wanting this for myself? Like, what is the reason that I'm wanting to hang out with this person? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, John Owen goes so far as to say, like, those who fail in public, in their public works, are because they have no base of a private works. Like, they don't have any sort of like, alone time with God. They just kind of do stuff and people see it, and then that's about it. And that's when it just kind of, deflates. And so, that's a really good point, really good quote by John Owen. I mean, it really is just a good book that just paints, like, okay, what is sin, and like, how do I, understand it? And it really has helped me just kind of, parse out, like, okay, what are my thoughts and where is my heart at? Yeah, which I think was super helpful for me, and like fighting sin, it's like constant diligence, and it's not, because a lot of times I'm just like, man, like, if I loved God, I wouldn't sin, and he's, he really kind of sets it out. Yeah, it's like, no, it's like you can.
It's an ever constant.
Yeah. It's like there's growth, like for, growing towards God and like, and in a love for him, but like, like you still know what is good and you still desire God and you want to be with God, but because of indwelling sin, we don't in everything that we do. So it's helpful, but he does combat it well with, he's not super antinomianism. Certainly not. You can never call a Puritan an antinomian. Yeah. That would be really far off.
Which is free grace. You know, just like I can sin and do whatever I want without, free grace, as much grace. Anyway. Yeah. It's a big word for it. I guess landing the plane, you mentioned this and I want to double tap on it. How do I kill sin? What do I do? And an application, just the way he words it, a quote, "If the heart is filled with the cross of Christ, it casts death and undesirability on them all, leaving no seeming beauty, pleasure, or comeliness in them." So, when we think of crucifying our lives with Jesus, like, I'm crucified with Christ, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, in life I now live in the flesh. I love by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It's meditating like I'm crucified with Christ, that I'm meditating on my sin was the one that put him to death, and really makes you think those things are unpleasant. And I really don't do a good job at that.
Yeah.
And
Highly recommend.
10 out of 10 would recommend. That's just the beginning. So may we have private lives greater than our public. I think we should end this.
That's great.
All right. At the end of every episode, we like to say, and that's how you trust God, bro. So ready?
Yep, ready.
Count us down. 3. And that's how you trust God, bro.
Dude, we nailed it.
Yeah, good job. Thanks.